All right, good afternoon. Ooh, sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joanna Cardenas, and I'm really excited to be here with you all today. Also, thank you to everyone who organized the event. I'm really excited to be in conversation with everyone in the room. As it was mentioned, I'm currently a PhD student in the Department of African American Studies at UC Berkeley. Today I will be giving a brief presentation on my paper titled Working on FIG, the Gendered Surveillance State of South Central Los Angeles. Just to give you all a brief roadmap of today's conversation, I will begin by giving you all a little bit of context on the importance of this work, and then I will go into the research questions, the methods and framework informing this paper, and then my findings and its bigger contributions. So to start, South Central is a predominantly Black and Latinx community in Los Angeles, California, that has a long history with police violence, police brutality, and police murders. Over the years, scholars have analyzed the carceral landscape of the city. However, they often turn their attention to the way gangs, police violence, surveillance, and mass incarceration have socially impacted men in this area, but may not consider the many intersections that form the social experiences of women of color in the city. Within my larger research project, I examined the way inner city life shapes the experiences of Black and Latinx women, with a focus on how state surveillance and policing operates in accordance with race, class, and gender. However, through this work, I find that policing and surveillance takes a variety of forms for inner city women based on race, class, gender, and labor, not only with institutions, but on an interpersonal level as well. This understanding sparked my interest in exploring the social understandings of how sex work is surveilled within South Central Los Angeles amongst the community and those who are outside of it. The Figueroa Corridor is a region in South Los Angeles where criminalization and surveillance are formative to the experiences of sex workers who work there. From the frequent presence of police in almost every block, the sounds of sirens in the distance, and the buzz of helicopter blades above them surveilling the area, the carceral state of Los Angeles has informed the relationships, experiences, and perceptions of gender within this part of the city for decades. Yet research is lacking regarding the social understandings of how sex work is criminalized and surveilled within Los Angeles. This paper examines how the surveillance state of Los Angeles shapes the experiences of women, sex workers in South Central through institutional and interpersonal forms of policing and everyday surveillance. Specifically, this paper is guided by the following research questions. How do women sex workers in Figueroa experience routine policing and surveillance? And how does the criminalization of sex work shape the relationship between labor, gender, and community in South Central? This paper is grounded in a Black feminist theoretical framework that validates the lived experiences as a source of knowledge. This work was made possible through the collection and deep visual analysis of more than 30 social media accounts across global platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, with more than 500 videos worth of unsolicited content surveilling sex workers in South Central. As someone who was born and raised in South Central, the experiences and the direct effects of those experiences inform the lens that I take when analyzing these videos. Before I go into the findings of this paper, I would like to offer a quick trigger warning, as some of these stories may be triggering for some as it pertains to multiple forms of gendered violence. This paper consisted of collecting, analyzing, and interpreting visuals in the forms of vlogs, photography, hood tourism, interviews, and unwarranted recordings through devices like camera, drones, cell phones, etc. This approach was used to gain a better understanding of how sex workers in South Central are consistently being surveilled through dialogue and visual content that is produced by the commodification of their experiences and bodies, through unsolicited recordings of their labor in an area that already experiences heavy forms of state-sanctioned violence through everyday policing practices. However, what their experiences also reveal within this realm of surveillance is that inner city women are not only vulnerable to police surveillance, but surveillance from interpersonal entities in their everyday life, creating a highly gendered surveillance state within Los Angeles that reproduces various forms of violence against them across race, gender, and class. Three main patterns of violence that I observed were the surveillance and commodification of sex workers' bodies, the criminalization across racial and gendered lines, and the neglect and reproduction of gendered violence. When it comes to the commodification of sex workers, the content that was observed captures the unsolicited recordings of several sex workers across the Figueroa Corridor during the day and during the night. Those who are recording are often silent. They pass through many of the sex workers during their shifts with recording devices in their hands as they walk through the sidewalk, or dashboards in their cars directly recording them. Through the videos, you observe many sex workers in discomfort, covering their face, or running towards the opposite direction. However, in the case of drones, many sex workers are not able to escape this weapon of surveillance, with some of them not knowing where to hide if they do not want to be seen, and with others not being able to see the device hovering over them. With views ranging from anywhere between 100 to approximately 143 million views on platforms like TikTok, for example, we see the apparatus of surveillance reproduce itself to police and profit off of the labor of sex workers in South Central. Many of the content creators researched for this paper are often cis men outside of the community and have extremely large social media platforms ranging from 20 to 6 million supporters. With special subscriptions that give access to exclusive content, we see the commodification placed on sex workers' bodies as they are framed as easily accessible, yet demanding exclusive consumption while simultaneously shaping how gender and bodily autonomy are understood in a space like South Central. However, due to how frequently these kinds of invasive practices happen, they are acknowledged more as a routine, making it seem more as a norm instead of a tactic of surveillance against them by those within and outside of the community. Simultaneously, sex workers are then forced to participate in a desensitized process that is required to enable them to become used to these realities within their labor, requiring them to develop what sociologist Nikki Jones would describe as situated survival strategies to be able to navigate South Central's gendered state. Along those same lines, we see how these forms of surveillance also engage in a form of knowledge production around how gender is and ought to be understood within this space, especially as it relates to the criminalization and racialization of their experiences. As many comments and users lay bare through these visual platforms, there is often a lack of consent, consideration, and understanding towards this area of labor. However, this brings up questions around what informs these notions, whether it's through the policing that already exists around the nature of this area of work, or by existing notions that surround the disposability and neglect of women who are a part of this community more broadly, that have highly informed their gendered experience. I argue in this paper that it's both. Through platforms like YouTube, videos, vlogs, and interviews, they demonstrate the constant desire and glamorization of what some users refer to as #hood life, and engages in the kind of knowledge production that reproduces notions of criminalization across gender, race, and space, further cementing the lack of urgency around gender violence in South Central and Los Angeles more broadly. Over the years, several deaths have been reported of cis and trans sex workers, including other women and young girls who live along the Figueroa corridor, ranging from sustained bullet wounds to the head, legs, and in many cases, multiple parts of the body. In 2022, for example, the body of 16-year-old Tiana Theos was found next to the 110 freeway for public display not too far from the Figueroa Street. However, these types of incidents come to be seen as normal by community members and tend to spark limited conversation on the linkages between these forms of gendered violence, with the surveillance and policing that already happens in the city that enables these forms of violence to exist in the first place against Black and Latinx women. Collectively, what these experiences show is the vulnerability of inner city women within the policing state of South Central, but especially the sex workers who work there. Aside from their labor not being recognized as such, their work is often surveilled and policed through multiple forms of global and interpersonal platforms. These practices consist of constant surveillance, entitlement to profit off of their labor without consent, and being commodified for extractive visual consumption, stripping them away from their positions as workers. These stories not only demonstrate that women are also impacted by the broader practices of surveillance and policing that happens every day in South Central, but they also acknowledge the importance of recognizing the linkages between their experiences in relation to race, class, and gender. Most importantly, the women in this paper challenge us to also think about the complexities of the carceral state and its contribution to how we think about policing and the role of interpersonal entities in further exacerbating multiple forms of gendered violence for the purpose of reconstructing our understandings of gender, violence, and social control across space. Thank you all for your time.